puerta está abierta. La puerta está abierta. Who left the door open? Who left the door open? One of my favorite outbursts in the series. Guys, the Busboy episode. So, this was, well, first off, one of the best episodes, I gotta say, in the series so far. It was also kind of like an episode that started like a trend that kind of like, helped improve the writing for Seinfeld. It was also a very interesting fact that this episode also is maybe the only, if not one of the only episodes that Jerry doesn't have a story in this episode. He was kind of more like just a background buffer involved in the main storyline. And that is, of course, the busboy. It's himself, Antonio. Which showed that Jerry was very generous in, giving his supporting cast the spotlight. But he was told, like, Jerry, it's supposed to be appreciated. The show's called Seinfeld. You gotta include yourself in as well. So this was one of the very few episodes that Jerry kind of like took a little bit of a backseat. I mean, yes, from here on out, obviously, the stories grew a little more major, I felt, with the characters. Especially, again, with how how things kind of like led to colliding with each other at the end of this episode. So the story going into this episode, the busboy, Jerry, Elaine, and George were out eating dinner at a restaurant. And the busboy, whose name was Antonio, put a menu a little too close to a lit candle. Caused a fire. George put it out, and he told the manager what happened. Not meaning to get fired, but just trying to tell him what happened with the menu. And Elaine jokingly goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm never coming back here," in a joking way. Well, they then see the manager talking to that busboy, and the busboy gets fired. And Elaine, and especially George, feel really bad about this. So, I think Elaine used her charm or something and somehow found out where that busboy lives. George wanted to go and apologize and try to make it up to the busboy. But of course he didn't want to go. So back at Jerry's apartment, they're talking about it, and Jerry says, "Hey, take the K-Man," as Kramer was walking out. Now, here's another fun fact. Despite the fact that there was a reason why Kramer was not in a certain episode in this season, which we'll talk about when we get to it, this is the first episode where Kramer actually left the apartment building. As he went with George to the busboy's apartment, he went over to apologize. But unfortunately, things went from bad to worse. As not only, of course, while they were over there, did Kramer break a lamp, but La puerta está abierta, if that's how it goes correctly. But basically, he was talking in Spanish. Who left the door open? As Kramer, in fact, left the door open. And in the midst of apologizing, Antonio's cat snuck out and went missing. They couldn't find it. And, George is apologizing about his job, his cat. In the background, Kramer breaks the lamp. He's like, the lamp. And they had no luck finding the cat, and they get out of there. As obviously, Antonio's just in a huge slump. Before we get to the ending, though, meanwhile, though, the second main story of this episode was Elaine and her boyfriend, Eddie. Some guy she met while in Seattle. He was coming to town to visit her and stay with her for a little bit. Well, it didn't take too long for probably some petty issues, maybe, for Elaine to just deeply despise this guy and just can't wait for him to get on a plane, get back home to Seattle. And the excuse that Elaine used to not really, have a physical week with him was saying that she was on her period. Well, as Elaine was literally counting down the hours, the seconds, until Eddie gets back on the plane, they wake up on the morning. Eddie was supposed to be at the airport, and they slept past the time. it was 9:15, and his plane took off at like 10:05, and it took 45 minutes from Elaine's apartment to get to the airport. But Elaine is going haywire because she's just obsessed with getting this man out of her apartment. And he's like, "We'll never make it. I'll go tomorrow night." She's like, "No, you gotta get out of here now. Gotta get out of here now." And she was just freaking out. Now, Julia Louis-Dreyfus actually said in the Inside Look that she wasn't completely satisfied with how she played that scene. She probably gave herself like a B-, and if there was one scene she'd love to reshoot, it would be that. Unfortunately, though, even though Elaine drove like a maniac, as in one of the last scenes, Elaine walks in with her hair all messed, just like with this like big, distraught look on her face, as basically she was driving like a maniac and was making great timing for getting to the airport. But if it wasn't for a 5-car pileup on what is it called now? Rockaway Boulevard, Eddie would have been on a plane back to Seattle instead of being downstairs looking for a parking spot. So she was stuck with him for yet at least another day. And it was going to be longer. Because here's where was like a key point in the series that kind of, gave the writers a different idea of, storytelling and writing. Especially, of course, since Jeremy talked afterwards, you're being too generous and not giving yourself a storyline in this episode. So, Antonio appears. And, of course, Carrie says, like, "The busboy's coming! The busboy is coming!" And then George is freaking out, like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's gonna kill me! I cost him his job, I've cost him the cat, Kramer broke his lamp, this, that." Well, Antonio comes in, and it looks like he's about to beat the crap out of George. But he corners George and says that a few nights ago, there was an explosion at the restaurant he worked at. And it destroyed the restaurant, and it also killed 5 people, including the busboy that they hired to replace him. And not long after that, his cat came back, and he got a better paying job at a different restaurant. And he basically thanks George for inadvertently firing him, because it basically saved his life. Of course, out of the dumb luck, somehow George saves a man's life, even though he basically cost him his job. The guy lost his cat, came back, and it's just like, George was one of the very few times in the series was a hero. But then it went downhill. This is one of the big moments in the series people like to talk about, as far as, especially Larry David referred to the Inside Look. As Antonio was leaving, Eddie, Elaine's boyfriend, was coming up the stairs. And they get into a confrontation, which leads to them getting into a fight on the stairwell. They fall down the stairs and suffer injuries. Antonio loses his new job, and Eddie is stuck with Elaine for a little while longer than Elaine would like to do. Yep. That was a little bit of like a turning point, because that was one of those, for the first time in the series, that the two stories a part of that episode came like colliding together, as in, like, they came full circle together at some point, which is kind of what stood out, and what it was helped improve the writing, and kind of like that it was a good way to kind of tie things together, make it, go from having like from a big story and a couple like little subplots that don't matter too much, like in The Ex-Girlfriend, of course, wherever it was like overpowered by the story about Jerry and Marlene, and then in the background you have Elaine dealing with a neighbor that went from hi and talking a bunch to literally just nothing and ignoring. To now we have both stories felt like they were very important for the whole episode. And that was kind of like what they kept going with afterwards, with that philosophy. Even the next episode, the baby shower, which they did it, but I felt like they went a little bit overboard with it. Because the stories were good in that episode, but I feel like they weren't, the most exciting ones. Like, this was a good one to come full circle with. Someone who was really like down on his luck, losing his job, his cat, and and whatnot, to a guy who's obviously successful that you want to just go away. They collide together, and then it was like back down for one, and then the one that you wanted to go away is still around. So it's a very unique type of storytelling there. Again, that definitely carried over to future episodes. That's basically it. Again, a good episode. Probably one of the best ones we've done so far. Maybe the best. I mean, I'd say from the first season, the Stakeout was probably my favorite one in that first series. The Stakeout. This probably out of all the episodes, I'd say this was probably the best one we've seen so far, because again, it definitely was like another turning point in the writers finding a groove with writing this show. And for Seinfeld, of course, become successful. But that's my review on The Busboy. The Busboy's coming. La Puerta está abierta. Or I haven't taken Spanish in a long time. I literally went back and watched that scene like 5 times before I did this review just to make sure I got that right, because I always cracked up about that. But, yep, that's my review on The Busboy episode. Guys, what were your thoughts on this episode as well? Make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content to come on my channel. Follow me on Twitter at DemandAirBoy93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see y'all later. Have a good night. Peace out, everybody.